Hi, this is Mia Dalene, and the radio show you're listening to right now is Healthy Living with Mia Dalene. And I have a special guest with me tonight, and I am so excited to have her on. This is Sandra Champlain, and I'm going to let her introduce herself, and we'll get into the topic for the evening. Sandra, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, Mia, thank you for having me on. I'm thrilled. Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about me, and I think why Mia asked me to the show, and just jump in if I'm missing something. But my name is Sandra Champlain, and by day, I am a chef, and I own a coffee and chocolate store, and I travel with race car teams, which sounds glamorous, but it's hard work. And anyways, I cook for them. But why I'm on the show is I'm also an author. I wrote a year and a half ago a book. It's called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And although it's got kind of a radical title, a little bit about why I wrote this book is that I had, back in about 96, developed a huge fear of dying, and very secretly went on kind of a hunt, is there any proof of life after death? And I was not ever going to tell anybody about my journey because I was really adamant that people that believed in things in the spiritual or metaphysical arena, that they were crazy people. And so when it's a skeptic's discovery of life after death, I really didn't believe in anything. Even though I was raised Catholic, at that point, I didn't have much faith in anything. So I started on this expedition, and over 15 years, I collected some great information about life after death that, for me, rested my fear of dying. And I wish I could tell you that back when I found all this information, I decided to write the book. But truthfully, I was too scared of what people would think of me if they knew I turned into one of these spiritual people. So I kept my mouth shut. In 2010, my dad got cancer, and he died 5 months later. And that time in my life was the most horrendous, painful experience that I've had, not just losing my dad, but Mia, I know we've all heard of families that have argued when a parent dies. And my family, my siblings and I, the relationship suffered and even ended with some of them. And so grieving the loss of my dad was probably the deepest, darkest time I ever had. And in that time, something hit me that, like, I wanted to know why grief has to hurt so bad. And so I found out some things about grief that most people do not know, and things that really helped me go through grief, losing my dad. So in a nutshell, I created an audio. I called it How to Survive Grief. I bought the domain name survivegrief.com, which still exists. And for free, people could go download my audio. It was 70-minute audio about grief. And within a matter of just a few months of posting it, and I think I only made 5 posts on Facebook about it, 3,000 people around the world had heard it. And people started emailing me how it helped relieve their pain, how it gave them hope, how it helped them communicate with family members instead of fighting. And then people started writing me that chose not to commit suicide because of my words. And I did a little research on the world of grief, and I found out that almost 50% of siblings' relationships split when a parent dies. 80% of couples get divorced when a child dies. 90% of marriages end when someone has a life-threatening illness or goes through some kind of a real health issue. And there's over 1 million grief-related suicides every year. And so the girl that never wanted to share my message before suddenly saw an opportunity that, not only an opportunity, but almost like a moral responsibility. If I have these words that can help, not only help heal, but save lives, it's like I had to get them out as far as I could. And Mia, I did not want to write a grief book because I think so many people don't realize they're even grieving. people attribute grief to a death, and it can be, like we said, loss of health or change of employment or, a divorce, so relationship breaking up. There's so many reasons we grieve. And so it just hit me, if I could have the guts to title my book, We Don't Die, tell my journey of why I believe in life after death, because it's risky putting this out there. I mean, I was really scared what people would think, but give people my whole journey, my experiences. That grief audio that I told you about has turned into chapter 10 in my book, because like it or not, everybody's going to experience grief, and I really wanted to educate people before it happens, or if they have it happening right now. And then the rest of the book is, if we don't die, well, what the heck are we doing here on planet Earth? And so I'm very playful in my writing, but it gets all of us in touch with, what our life might be for. So it's kind of like a handbook for living. We're able to look back on our past, and a lot of people get in touch with their dreams. Some people have found their careers out of it. Some people have conquered some fears by reading it. Anyways, it just sheds a little light on maybe why we're here as human beings and what our life's all about. So ultimately, I'm all about empowering people, no matter what's been given to us and what cards have been dealt and what loss we have to deal with, really empowering people to have the best life while we're here, whatever that looks like. So how's that for an introduction?
That's awesome, and that hooks right into your best life while we're here, hooks into my mission, is to increase, it's to raise money for people with disability for the purpose of increasing their quality of life. And so that's what this radio show was about. It's actually for anybody to listen to, but I ask people to think about, I try to provide things during my radio show that help people to think about something that might help them have a better quality of life. Sometimes it's nutrition. This is an awesome thing, the book that you've written and you coming on the show, because this is very big for a lot of people that I know. I know a lot of people who have attempted suicide. Some made it, some didn't, and just the whole feeling of despair while we're living, and going through the grief and not wanting to live a life that like we didn't choose. I'm talking about brain injured people as well as non-brain injured people. And so right. I think this is really a great book because it can help realign us with living. And that's what my hope is for everybody who's within ear's reach, that no matter where you are on the spectrum of life, that there's probably always something you can do to help yourself have the higher quality of life, even if it's just thinking a positive thought in that moment. So yeah, I'm really glad that you're here. Yeah.
I'm glad too. And if I can just say, like, when I first had the idea of the book, of course, I had to approach a publisher. And I was scared to death that this man was going to think I was a freak. Like, there's no way, like, I can't believe you're talking about this. Nobody wants to hear about it. And I was so afraid that it really took every bit of courage to just be honest with this man. And this man was a stranger. It wasn't like I ever had to see him again. And his name is Rick Frischman, and he used to be a publicist, and he was the first guy that founded Jack Canfield with Chicken Soup for the Soul, and also Mitch Albom with Tuesdays with Maury. And, so he got a lot of big authors started. So when I shared with him what I wanted to write about, I was, petrified. And there is a process of, like, creating a book proposal, and it's basically an outline of the book, why I feel this book is necessary, write a couple of sample chapters, how the book differs from other books. And so I had to submit that first. And when I got the answer, we want to publish you, it was more like, how fast can you write this? You can potentially help millions of people with this message. It went from an idea in my head to being a printed book in just maybe 3 months. So I literally wrote it as fast as I could. I imagined there was a human being sitting in front of me, and it's very conversational because I'm just talking to you, the reader, about this is my experiences. So a lot of people say it's very easy to read. But the thing is for me being so afraid, does anybody want to listen to me? I am now, this book hit #1 grief book in the U.S., UK, and Canada. I have a friend of mine, Kathy, who writes to radio stations and talks about the book and things, and we're just hoping for people that want to interview me. And this one radio station, Coast to Coast AM, it gets broadcast on over 600 stations in North America, and so many people bought the book on Amazon. I have no idea even how many around the world. And it's in the grief category of books, and it's also in the motivational category of books. So it hit #4, top motivational book on Amazon, which is humongous. So why I'm saying this is we all, I know we can experience a lot of joy in life, but there's also some tremendous suffering. And in the moment of suffering, I mean, a lot of times we can't see the way out. And I'm asking people to consider, even though I don't have all the answers, nor do I pretend to, but if we can say we might not have the answer right now, but maybe this pain, there's something for me to learn from it. And like, for instance, for me, I found out so much about grief. I found out a lot about living life. Now that I've put this together, I mean, not only has it hit #1 on Amazon, but the amount of people that have heard my words either from the Survive Grief audio or have read the book, it's no more just a few people that have chosen not suicide. There's a lot more. There's a lot of people that have these unbelievable stories. I mean, one lady had locked herself in the house for 5 months after her husband died. It devastated, and her daughters tried to give her a copy of We Don't Die. She said, I don't believe in that. I don't want that in the house. Well, the daughters ended up leaving it anyways. Well, the mother read it, and it's not what she thought it was, and now she's out taking country line dancing classes. I mean, there's so many stories of people being empowered. And so I just ask people that are listening, no matter where you're at in your life, you know, if you look back on the good times and the bad times, everything that's happened to you has had to happen to you for you to be where you are now, and just to trust. And I know this is hard to do because some people are going through some real devastating times, but that maybe you learn something right now that's going to have an impact somehow, maybe helping someone else, maybe in your own life. Anyway, so that's what I just wanted to say, is that out of my deepest despair came something that's making a difference for just thousands of people right now.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. And when you were talking, you were saying to trust. And my question was, but why this? So for me, it's like, but why brain injury? But why the devastation of like having to become a whole nother person? You know,
Yeah.
That's just my own grief.
Yeah, and I don't have the answers. I mean, I saw my dad suffer terribly before he passed away. And, you know, why does it have to hurt so bad? I have no idea why there has to be such an intense level of suffering. I don't. I really don't. But all that being said, it's like, given what we do know, how can we use some tools to still be fulfilled, still, you know, make our life the best it can be? And, you know, I do at some point in the show want to talk about my life after death stuff, because it's pretty cool, some of the things that I've experienced. But if it's all right with you, only because you brought this up in the beginning about a lot of the depression and a lot about the suicide, like what happens in our brain. Can I get into a little bit of that?
Yeah, first let me go ahead and put the number out, because I need to let the people
sure.
listening know that they call-in number if they want to call in and talk to Sandra or me or both of us and ask a question or have a comment. You can call area code 424-243-9540. I'll do that again. It's 424-243-9540. And then I want to let you know that tonight I'm using a different laptop to do the show, and so I don't have access to the to my Facebook page. But I was asking people to go ahead and put questions on there last time, but this time I'm going to ask you to call in to the show, or when you sign up with if you come on just to listen on it's on braininjuryradio.com. If you come in on the computer, then you can just log in to the chat, and you can ask your question there. So tonight it's a little different. We're just doing it on the computer chat room thing here we've got, and then also call in. So look forward to hearing your calls, and we'll go ahead and, Sandra, go ahead and talk about the depression.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I don't mean to be taking over the show, but I don't know why.
No, you're not.
Well, yeah, sometimes, I just don't want to be one of those pushy guests, but, we're here in such a short time over the course of life that if I've got something that might make a difference, because I know typically there's, even if you're physically well, there's still pain. Life is not easy. It can be at some points, but other times can really be a challenge. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit with grief and loss, and tying it into depression and suicide, and is just a little bit about grief. Like I said earlier, a lot of us just attribute grief, or at least I did, to when somebody dies. Oh yeah, he's experienced grief and you hurt an awful lot. That's pretty much a well-known thing. But when I started researching grief, any time we have a significant loss of any kind, we experience grief. So loss can be brain injury. Loss can be a close loved one of yours experiencing, something with their health. Grief can be empty nest syndrome, when a mom and dad lose a kid that goes off to college that's been there for 18 years. Grief can be a breakup of a significant relationship, like a romantic relationship, or even a good friend. If you lose that, you can experience grief. If your financial situation changes, grief kicks in. Even there's something called anticipatory grief. If you or someone close to you gets diagnosed with something, it can put you in this state of grief. Now, grief, yes, we know it's going to hurt real bad, but grief is what's happening in the brain, because there's actually a biological reason we grieve. It is, if we have something in our life, grief is almost like shocks us to say there's a new reality. And somebody explained it once, like if you could imagine a baby bear that gets, like say the mother bear dies. Well, the baby bear is going to experience this shock, this grief, because it's like a wake-up call that there's a new surrounding and that you have to be responsible for your own life, like you're going to be carrying on a different way. So it's kind of a survival mechanism. And why it's so painful, I'm not certain. But what's happening in our brains is we are all functioning on these things called neurotransmitters, kind of like how your car needs oil and gasoline and radiator fluid and, steering fluid and all that stuff. Our system requires these different neurotransmitters. So we've all heard of things like when we feel good and we laugh, endorphins get released, and we hear of things like serotonin that makes us feel better, and we hear about like when we eat too much turkey on Thanksgiving, well, not for vegetarians, but whatever, that, there's a thing called tryptophan and we get really relaxed. Well, serotonin is our main thing that gets depleted when we grieve. So if we have this significant loss, say a healthy brain has 100% serotonin, well, the serotonin can drop so drastically, and I'm going to use this just as a percentage. I don't know exactly, but maybe like 10 to 20% of what we normally have. Well, serotonin, it regulates things like our mood. So that's why the intense sadness and depression. It regulates things like our sleep cycle. So you may know that you either sleeping a lot or you can't sleep at all. It regulates our memory. A lot of people that have had a significant loss, just like they can't remember where they put their keys, did I have this conversation with someone? It's like our memory stinks. Our perception is off. Like you and I could be looking at the same thing, Mia, and say we're grieving sisters. You and I will be storing the information completely different and may not even be accurate to what happened. So there's a lot of things that are controlled by this neurotransmitter in the brain. And why this is important is because some individuals go through really an intense loss of these brain chemicals. And so if we don't know about grief and we don't know that this is what happens, how it feels in our system is we feel like like another person. And I know I'm kind of speaking to the choir here, but the level of darkness, the level of depression, the level of my life will never be the same. Often there's feelings of suicide. Often there's just feelings like, I just can't live with this, or, the world would be better off without me. There's tremendous anger that we can feel. And again, this is just the lack of these feel-good neurotransmitters going through us. There's a lot of guilt that can be running through us. There's a whole bunch of, we've all heard of like the stages of grief, anger and bargaining and depression and, different things. But I think there's so much more than that. You could be in a state of shock. You could maybe not cry at all. There's so many different things that are involved with it. But why it's so important to know, and I really want to suggest to people, whether you're going through grief or not, or just curious, take the time to go to my www.survivegrief.com website and just press the play button. It's completely free, and just to get a little bit of understanding, because a lot of times we're grieving in our life and we don't even realize it. And I go through a lot more of the definition of grief and what you may or may not be feeling. But when you can all of a sudden go, gosh, I got that. Yep, I feel that too. Yep, I feel that too. You'll have a little bit of compassion, and maybe you'll look to see, geez, this loss was more significant. So maybe there is a brain injury and you thought, okay, I'm okay by now. I got it together. And then you're really looking like you still have these symptoms. Well, the grieving process takes time to go through. This is probably a poor comparison, but if we can imagine someone who has had an addiction to, say, drugs or alcohol, and then we take away that substance, well, that person is no longer getting their fix. So if you were to look at them, you'd probably see them shaking. You'd probably see them, really sick. Their brain and body really need to kind of reformat everything to existing without that chemical. And grief is very much the same. Our thing that we love, whether it's a human being or our health or our job or our relationship, when something gets taken away, we go through that withdrawal process. And it's not as easy as just saying, you've had 3 days off, you should be over it by now, which a lot of people think. But no, your body and your mind really need time to build up these healthy brain chemicals again to get back on your feet, and your life won't be the same. So I ask people who either are grieving or know someone that is, or, in so many cases, there's so many arguments. Even thinking of a husband and wife that get divorced when a child dies, what they need to do, and we all think of it, is that's when they should be strongest and be there for each other. But if you can imagine these people prone to guilt, prone to anger, not being able to really communicate because their brain's not functioning right, their perception's off, so they might be arguing about something that didn't happen exactly the same way. I'm really out to save relationships, and by educating people, I really do believe that families can stay strong when there is a loss. Wow, that's a mouthful. but you know I'm passionate.
Yeah, that is really wonderful. I'm really glad you talked about the brain and the chemicals, and that was great. So I want to ask you a little bit more about the process of writing and the people that you came across who have shared their stories with you. Can you talk a little bit more about perhaps like the people who have come to you after they've after they've read your book, and what things that they have said to you?
Sure. I'm going to tell you this is the first guy that actually got me to write the book. He was the man that looked me right in the eye, and he very casually said something about my life was over till I listened to your audio. And I thought, oh, he's like, you saved my life. I thought, oh, thanks. And he's like, no, you really did. And he had told me he had already had his exit strategy planned for suicide. And he said, when I listened to it, and this one was actually a case of his wife had left him for another man. So it wasn't a death. It was grief by that kind of a loss. And he said when he listened to my audio, he said, 3 times in it, he said, it was like you were talking just to me. He says, you knew exactly what I was thinking and feeling. That he says, it hit me that, oh my gosh, this must be grief. Because he said, and then what he did was he took the steps that I had said to help ease the pain and help move through it a bit faster. So to see a grown man, teary-eyed, looking straight at me, that was incredible. But other stories, there was a woman that she wrote, this is an email, she wrote me and she said for 3 years she was grieving the loss of her husband. She said she tried everything under the sun. She read books. She went to support groups. She saw a psychologist. She was in a grief support group and got actively involved with the church. She says, nothing helped me move on, ease my pain, and get my life back until I read chapter 10 of your book. And she loved the whole book, but she says, chapter 10 was it. It's phenomenal. There is a man who's over in South Africa that lost his lifetime partner, his wife, and his nephew and niece ended up bringing him a copy of my book thinking, Uncle so-and-so is in his late 80s. Like, I don't even think he'd want to read something like this, but we're going to leave it for him. Well, I'm happy to report that not only is he really believing that his wife is still near and still kind of includes her in his daily activities, thinking of her, but you'll see, I think you have seen because you have the book, it's filled with very inspirational quotes. And this man over in South Africa, this is what his niece and nephew said, like all the pages are dog-eared, and he'll get together with his group of friends and somebody's having a bad day. Well, let's turn right here and, how to empower his friend to get back on with their life. So he's actually using it and coaching people out of it. I had met a woman at a speaking event that I did in Scottsdale, Arizona, and a friend of hers drove 21 hours to meet me to tell me the impact that the book had on her life, which I can't even imagine such a thing, but she was afraid of flying, but she's like, I had to come meet you and thank you. And then this other woman, Karen was her name, she sat with me and she had a copy of my book, same thing, all the pages kind of dog-eared, and she gave me a copy of Vanity Fair magazine, and I couldn't understand the connection, and she said, in your book, Sandra, you talk about either being a victim of things that happened to you and really being caught up as a victim in life, or, like I said in the beginning, using the information you've got, maybe doing some research and making a difference for another person. And so what she did is her daughter had died of a certain birth control substance by a certain pharmaceutical company, and she found out that tons of young women were getting really incredible, like bad things happening, including death. And so she gave me this copy of Vanity Fair magazine because the article was about her and her daughter. And then she says, I'm going to be on Anderson Cooper next week. And she's just a proponent trying to help other people through, that have been through this. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. There's a family, there were 6 siblings that used to fight like crazy. And this one girl, she made all of her siblings read the book before the dad passed away. They knew he was on his way out. He had cancer. And she says, so instead of fighting over his things, we very civilly, each got an opportunity to express what we wanted, and, we stayed together as a family. One lady read just chapter 1, and she's like, I figured out my life purpose. She's like, I have been struggling with, like, what makes me happy, what do I want to do, and, one chapter, and she got that. So, I'm not here trying to push the book on people, because it might sound like I am, but I want everybody to know that website I gave you, survivegrief.com, and also wedon'tdie.com, you can go and you can download the first couple of chapters, and because I know in the interview we're not going to be able to get to everything, but I put a lot in those, and even all my research and stuff is on the websites, so you can find out more. But it is incredible, Mia, because you'll find this out. I know your radio show is kind of new, but the longer it goes on, it really, you get this feeling of knowing that your pain and suffering and your gift of caring about people can really make a difference for others, and you may never see or hear from people again, but just to know that some really profound things can happen when you're courageous enough to share your pain, your struggles, what you've learned, and then want to make a difference. Because again, I think it's a human thing to have a ton of fear, but what a gift. I would have never in a million years thought that, the thing I was most afraid of sharing about, because I really thought people would think I was a lunatic. There's more people than not that are interested. Men, women, everybody. Doesn't matter an age. So fear is not always the greatest thing, unless it's out there to save your life from an oncoming bus. A lot of times fear is just an illusion. And, our brains do a mighty good job of trying to keep us safe. But there's some really good things to be had.
We have some people who are chatting on the chat line, and what I did was I have 2 free books, or 2 books that you are actually provided to give away to people. And so I actually just, as we're chatting along, as you're chatting, as you're talking, and then we're on the chat line thing here, we have somebody who got the first book, and so that's Lance Norman. He, I wrote something in there, and he answered it, so he gets the first book, We Don't Die. I have a second one we'll give away in about 20 minutes. But,
hi, Lance, and hi, everybody. Yes, absolutely.
So Lance is he's saying this is such a blessing to be able to help strangers by sharing her experience. And so so that he wanted to say that to you. And also, he wanted to know about, as you were talking about the nutrition, or not nutrition, about the shift in the brain chemicals. And he was wondering about, what about nutrition? And what would you recommend to increase the serotonin?
So great question, Lance. Yeah, and shame on me for not bringing that up. There's several things we can do. And unfortunately, it's not like a flip of the switch. Like, you just do this, and then all of a sudden you'll feel better. It is a process. So if I can, Mia, I can just go through some things that will make a difference, because Lance, absolutely nutrition will make a difference. What the idea is we need to get our brain and body healthy again and give it a little time away from grief. And it may sound like it's impossible, but if you can get your mind on something else, even if it's just for a few seconds, a distraction. So it could be something like taking yourself to a movie, listening to some music that normally you enjoy. If you can journal, and you're really like downloading everything that's on your thoughts, just putting it onto a piece of paper without any judgment. Doing things like being with other people. Sometimes when we're grieving, like when I lost my dad, I just wanted to be away from people. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And then somehow there was a shift, and then I had to tell everybody my story over and over and over and over and over again and over again and over and over and over. Whatever that was about, I don't know. But sometimes being around a loving friend or loving person can make a huge difference. A friend of mine brought me to a puppy store. It was like a nice mom and pop operation where you could actually pick up the puppies in the pens. And I mean, I couldn't stop crying. And then all of a sudden I'm being smothered with puppy love. And as crazy as this seemed, in that moment, in that present moment, pain wasn't present when I have all these little doggies licking my ears. I mean, and again, this could be just a few short things, but it's just enough to kind of start letting some, healing taking place in the brain. Eating right, Lance, and everybody else listening, and exercise, absolutely. Going outside, getting sunlight. I mean, when we're grieving, often it's such a dark place. We want to be under the covers. We want to be alone. But to go outside, to listen to the birds, to exercise the body, we always hear that when you exercise, it releases endorphins. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Yes, will your mind start thinking about your loss and start thinking about that stuff? Yeah, because we're human, and that absolutely happens. But eating right, I think very often we're prone to either not eating at all or like overeating, eating every bit of junk food you can just to find some comfort. And of course, we know too much sugar, too much caffeine, all that kind of stuff ultimately doesn't make us feel better. So nutrition is a great thing. Doing something, like I call it being in the present moment. Some people call it meditation. It can be named as a lot of things, but I don't want people to think you're necessarily sitting in the lotus position with your eyes closed going, anything like that. But we all know from our past that we have this little voice inside of our head. And unfortunately, many times we think it's us talking, but whether we call it self-talk, some people call it the inner critic, I call it the voice. We all have this voice, and it sounds like our voice, that is just non-stop talking. And to use something like guilt for an example, if a lot of times when we're experiencing a loss, there's guilt, like I'm thinking about my dad had cancer, and he was loaded up on drugs, and we knew it was any time that he would pass, and I knew he was still in incredible pain. Well, his best friend called me and said, Sandra, can you hold the phone to your father's ear? I want to say goodbye to my best friend. So I put the phone up to my dad's ear, and I could hear the message from the friend, and it was so loving and so beautiful, and it makes me cry even just thinking about it. Well, after Dad passed away, it dawned on me that I held the phone to my dad's deaf ear. He was deaf in his right ear, and my brain stewed upon how stupid I was and what a big mistake that was, and like he never got the message from his friend, and like shame on me, I mean, for months. Well, here's the thing. The more we think a thought, the more that thought automatically happens. It's similar to brushing our teeth. The more we brush our teeth, the more times before we go to bed we can't sleep unless we brush our teeth. Well, the more times we feel a feeling of guilt, or we feel a feeling of anger, or we start stewing upon something, your brain is creating a new pattern for like, oh, let me think that again. So when your mind goes quiet, all of a sudden it'll kick in, and so we start thinking things without our control. I mean, we've often heard of people that have lost a loved one and are grieving for like 30 years. And that's because of that. They don't know that there actually is a choice to, I don't want to say turn it off, but if we have the distinctions around grief, if we know that there's the anger, if we know there's going to be depression, if we know we're going to be prone to feeling guilt, whatever that is, if we can catch ourselves in the act, they say what you resist persists. So I'm not saying if you're angry to just try to turn it off, because it's pretty darn impossible. But if you can say, oh, I have had a significant loss. I'm feeling angry. Okay, let me take a few deep breaths. And what I call getting in the present moment is literally looking at whatever's right in front of you right now. And you might see a blanket. You might have a I don't know, dog or cat that you can touch, or you might have some music playing, or sometimes just running your fingers over the texture of something and being so keen on what you're feeling and turning off that little voice in your head, even if it's just for those couple of seconds, it provides some healing to occur. And even if it's just a 0.5% boost of your serotonin going on, like the more you do it, the more it happens. So find time to really be in the present moment. And like I said, if you want to call it meditation, great. But one of the pitfalls, I call it, of being human is that we all do have this little voice in our head, and I want to tell you that little voice isn't your best friend. You know, when I wake up in the morning, I don't care. Like, nobody heard you ask me this before the show, Mia, but Mia said, "Oh, what's it like being a #1 international best-selling author?" And I'm like, well, it feels very much like I was before. You know, I mean, like, I'm same old Sandra. But when I get up in the morning and I look in the mirror, like, too much gray hair, too many wrinkles now. I mean, I'm like only 48, but too fat, still single. Like, it is nonstop negative stuff. Like, I shouldn't have hit the snooze button. I had too much to do today. What a waste I am. You know, I mean, it's negative. And so I think we all have that. Well, here's the thing. If any one of us right now were to go find 20 people or 10 people that know us really well, and we ask that person to describe us, you know, my friends would probably say, well, I have asked them, but they're like, oh, you're so smart, and you're not afraid of anything, and you're so funny, and you're so outgoing, and you're so confident, and you make things happen, and gosh, you're so fun to be with. Now, completely opposite from what the little voice just told me, getting up out of bed. But here's the thing I want everybody to understand. There's one of you with whatever negative self-talk you might have, and you might have a dozen people that have this other really great stuff to say about you. Well, who's right? Well, here's the thing. It's your friends and family with those really, really great things. Who we really are is who we show the world that we are. That little voice inside of our head is a kind of another survival thing that we have as being human. We live our lives very often in fear. That little voice convinces us, don't try that. It's not going to work, or somebody's going to reject us, or, you know, people will think you're stupid. It's a survival mechanism of some sort so that we don't, like, we just stay in our comfort zone. And, you know, I think the real message of the whole book and everything is if we can go past our comfort zone, if we can, you know, get in touch with some of our dreams, some of the things, they might be new dreams. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have to be an old dream that you keep with, but something that you really want. And if we can step into some of those fears, you know, what you find out when we're in the midst of doing something that we were afraid of, like if you, gosh, you haven't talked to somebody in 10 years and you want to pick up the phone and apologize maybe for not talking in 10 years, you know, you could spend 10 years being afraid to pick up the phone. Well, the moment you pick up the phone and that other person gets on the line, you get so in the present moment with that conversation that something magical happens. Fear disappears because when you're in the present moment, fear isn't there. And then more people, successful people, have said that the only reason they're successful is because they stepped through their fear. And it takes doing something you've never done before to have new results you haven't had before. And I mean, I'm just one example that, I mean, I truly thought no one would be interested in my words and laugh at me. And now, you know, I've got a book that's, you know, providing a whole heck of a lot of joy for people. So
that is so awesome. You know, as you're talking, I'm thinking, Sandra, you're such a pleasure. You know, I just love listening.
Oh, thanks. And, you know, Mia, my voice is going,
yeah,
oh my gosh, you're talking too much. Nobody's kidding. Look, you just cut off Mia. You know, you're not letting her talk. So I've got the same thing going on in my mind. I don't have this handled just because I wrote the book. So anyways, this all goes to Lance's question about nutrition. Oh, funny.
Yeah. No, you're doing really great. Yeah. And I really love that who we really are is who we show the world that we are. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna frame that one. Who we really are is who we show the world that we are. And
it's,
I want to also speak to the. Go ahead.
no, that's it. Your turn.
I wanted to go ahead and talk more about the nutrition side of things because I do have a DVD, Dalene Smart Raw Food Method, and I am also giving away a DVD of my Smart Raw Food Method. It's the food that I used that helped my brain awaken, and so how my brain was. And when you're talking about the, some people call it good mood food. And then you're talking about like the brain chemistry, and I know for a fact that like this helped me, and I've known a lot of people who it helped their brain chemistry, and it's because the nutrition that you get from not heating your food above, 118 degrees, it's like you get all the phytonutrients and stuff in there, and minerals are still intact, and you take that in, and it really helps me a lot. And for me, it was the difference between laying on the couch and wanting to die and feeling like I don't know how I'm supposed to live, and I don't know how I'm supposed to take care of my kids. They were really young at the time in elementary school, and I just want to cry thinking about it.
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Well, that's all right.
But it was
I'm
the difference.
share.
I just want to say that it was the difference between that and then eating this way and then going within 3 days, like out of depression, because it was a week later, it was like all the pain I had in my body, all the headache, like that I had for 5 years was gone. And it's just like because of the types of things that I put in my mouth, the things that I ate, I learned how to prepare this food, and then within 5 months, it was like someone turned a switch on, and my brain, what I say is like it woke up. I had access to information that I learned in college that, the bridge was out until that point where I couldn't use the big words, and the thought processes were minimal. And so for me, nutrition is huge. And so I made this DVD to show people how to make this food so it would be easy and cost efficient. And so if there's someone out there who wants this, you just need to type in that you want it. And whoever types in they want it, I have several I will give to whoever wants it because it is so important. It also comes with I think it's 26 pages of recipes that I created and to help people. So I just want to offer that to anybody who wants it, and then we'll get back to what Sandra's talking about. So go ahead.
And Mia, could you give your website again? Because I'm going to share this interview. I know it's being recorded with my followers, and I would love, because truthfully, I knew that it's important to have nutrition, but I've never heard something like your story, like that it's that important and the difference that it can provide. So if you could give your website again slowly so I can pass that on.
My website is smartrawfood.com. SMART, raw, R-A-W, food, FOOD.com.
Awesome.
And what I did was most recently, just almost 2 years ago, I guess 18 months ago, I moved to the Spokane area from Seattle. And I was like asking the universe, no, God, why are you putting me here? I don't understand this. And then I found that this area has like the huge brain injury support network. And it's just like there was one aspect of the recovery that I did not get for the whole 4 or 5 years I was going through all the rehabilitation stuff, and it's here. So I found it, or it found me, and then I started doing, taking this class that's part of the support group, and it actually gave me my mission, which was to raise money for people who are disabled and to help them to keep living and to live a better life than they would have had if they didn't have that injury or that disability. So
that's awesome.
So that's what happened to me. But and then this actual radio show is part of that, because as part of that class, the instructor asked me, hey, would you like a radio show? And I was like, what? What do you want me to talk about? I don't know what to talk about. And so, but he said, why don't you talk about nutrition? Or why don't you talk about whatever you want? And so my whole idea was to bring people on, like I said earlier, to give people ideas and inspiration for how they might incorporate it into their life, or, figure out how they're going to make their life their own and live it well. So having you on is just so amazing, and I just think you're wonderful. So,
I thought of
go ahead.
two more things. I thought of two more things that make a difference to raise the serotonin level, and I know there's a lot more. I'm just not thinking of them right now. But what you just said is creating this radio show and sharing everything. There's something called making a difference for another. And I think that most of us have, even on a small level, made some kind of a difference for another human being. And there is this joy, whether it's you volunteering or whether it's, a random act of kindness that you're giggling to yourself, you paid somebody's toll and you don't even know the car behind you. Little things like that, if you can find opportunities to make a difference, it can bring you joy. It can also redirect your focus as opposed to looking at any kind of a loss. And when you have your eyes set on helping another person, that's what you're paying attention to. Our minds can only pay attention to one thing at a time, so we can pay attention. I can kind of put it in the victim mode, and our autopilot brain machinery will want to go into the victim mode. It really takes something to put ourselves in the responsible mode. And are you responsible for your injuries and deaths and things? Well, no. But if you can say something like, there's one author that has this practice, and she says, this is the worst thing that happened to me because, and then you fill in the blank, but it could be the best thing that happened to me because. And sometimes it takes creative imagination to think, oh my gosh, what could I do with my suffering or my loss or whatever. But somehow if it turns into making a difference for another person, I guarantee you it'll channel some of your energy into a really good place, and to make a difference for another is a wonderful thing. There's a guy named Zig Ziglar who once said, you can get everything you want in your life by helping enough other people get what they want in their life. So it is about helping others. So that's a great serotonin-producing thing. And the other thing I forgot about was gratitude. And I don't say this lightly because it's so easy to say. It's kind of like, I don't say the new age term, but everybody's like, use gratitude. But it really means taking the time and really looking around and being grateful. I told you I cook for race car teams as my day job, and I was out in the city of Long Beach doing a race, and we always have leftover food. Well, I donated food to a shelter, and I found out that there's 70,000 homeless people just in Los Angeles alone. 70,000. And then I thought, if you can, I call it the gratitude game, or have a little gratitude book, and even if you're deeply miserable, and your homework is to write down 50 things you're grateful for. And you start writing, and it could be just the smallest things. But I mean, it can be having food on the table, having a roof over your head. And then you might start thinking back, maybe the birth of a child, or your marriage, your wedding day, or, that you go outside and there's so many beautiful flowers that are out. And, you really just start looking for things you're grateful for. There will be this shift in your brain chemistry, and you can actually feel it because your mood will change. And you just kind of come into this more peaceful stage when you really feeling grateful. It's like, I think it's probably the fastest way to change from any kind of a negative emotion to a positive one. And, it's like I said, it's not as easy as a flip of a switch, but it takes, when you really focus your attention to looking for things that you're grateful for. And really, it can even be the tiniest of things. But the more you do it, the more it's like, yeah, I do have that. You know what? I do have that, and I still can do this. And, I talked to a gentleman a couple days ago who his wife had a stroke and only has use of half of her body, and I think only has 20 words in her vocabulary, and she's still a relatively young woman. But he was telling me that, in the beginning, how hard it was and how much anger she had and he had. And but now they go on cruises together. I mean, they look for things where she can be in her wheelchair, that it's easy, where there's entertainment. And, like they've made it work somehow. And after a long enough time, it became, I don't want to say easy, but easier. And they were able to enjoy each other. I think no matter what situation we're in, there's still somehow we're able to enjoy a little joy. I mean, my dad, unbelievable example. He played a little game that every nurse or doctor that walked into his hospital room would leave a little bit happier because they came into the room with him and I. And, I mean, it took something because, here's my dad that's been diagnosed with cancer and his days are really numbered. And when he made it about another person, there was joy there. So it takes something, because that little voice inside of our head really wants to stew on the negatives. And I know that because I still live it. So it takes being on your show, not as a guest, but I mean just anybody listening in. It takes reading empowering books as you're in your car or wherever, listening to positive things. I don't think we can always do it alone, pull ourselves out.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I was reminded of last night was to celebrate our successes. And so if you're looking for things to celebrate, one thing that I like to do is gardening and making a place look, more beautiful than it was before. And then the joy for me is to have people enjoying, they walk by and they get a little lift from that beautiful whatever. And so for me, I like to stand back and look at, that raised bed that I helped put together, or the soil that I put in there, or the fire pit I did the other day. So it's like looking at it and appreciating it kind of makes it stick in my head that I have done something, but also that something that people can enjoy. Many people will be able to enjoy that. So
that's beautiful.
But that's just one thing. Now, Lance is asking another question. He wanted me to ask you about alternative grief therapies. Is that something that you talk about on your podcast, or your that we were sending people to the survivegrief.com?
I don't know what he means by alternative grief therapy. There's so many different, I think, therapies out there. Basically, when I'm instructing people, I'm not the be-all and the end-all of grief. I can help people identify it, give what's happening biologically in the brain, and give a lot of tools to help people move through grief. But on my website, too, there's plenty of other support out there. A woman and I created a support group called WeCareGriefSupport.com, and it's a closed membership site, that people can, another thing that it's not free to join, but it's certainly, if you're in there for a month, you don't like it, you get your money back. But there's tools in there to work through the grieving process at your own time. But, there's different modalities to move through grief. So I don't necessarily think that there's one main way, and I think every human being's experience is different. And I think it's important to find something that you're aligned with and that works for you. We deep inside know what's a match and what isn't. So all of my grief information is, I don't want to say it's generic, but it's things that I know usually work for the masses or help. And certainly, if there's, and I want to recommend everybody too, if you do have a counselor, if you do have Sometimes people are so deep in grief and depression, it's just like I can't, I've been trying these things and I can't find a way out. Or if you do start feeling like I've never been in this dark place before, it'd be easy for me to check out of this lifetime. I mean, it's not a sign that there's something wrong with you. It's a sign that you have severe, loss of these healthy brain chemicals. And by all means, absolutely, I recommend people, if there's any doubt, to see a therapist, see your doctor. Start with your doctor and, and share the symptoms and what's going on. Because to do it alone, like I never, my mom is still alive, my dad has passed. I never want to go through grief alone again, because I'm not somebody who contemplated killing myself, but I was so deeply depressed and dark, as dark as it can be, that I could see why other people would do it, because I was not the same Sandra I'd ever been before. I didn't even recognize myself. I couldn't pull myself out. It was awful. I really thought there's something tremendously wrong with me. And thankfully, it had me research grief as opposed to, doing something else. But, like I said, we don't talk about this as a whole as, there's no grief 101 that we take in school. And so I think it is important to talk about it. So, Lance, I'm sorry, I don't know too much about alternative things, but I'm definitely open to learning more. And if anybody has anything to share with me, on my website, We Don't Die, there's a contact Sandra button, or if you want to do Sandra@WeDon'tDie.com, you can write to me as well.
That's awesome. Let's see, I want to ask another question about your book. Now, I see that the foreword is by Bernie Siegel, and
yes.
That is awesome to have him. Let's see, I don't know what I want to ask about that. Can you tell me about him?
Yeah, I got a good story. When I went to write the book, I had a coach helping me with how I go about doing it all. And he said, now you need to have somebody famous write your foreword and write a quote for the front of the book. And I thought, I don't know anybody famous. And he says, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but have you ever heard of Bernie Siegel? Well, Mia and everybody, 30 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with cancer for the first time. And he was given 3 months to live. And my dad found Dr. Bernie Siegel, who at the time was the forefather of doing the mind over body medicine. Yes, he was a surgeon. Yes, he practiced traditional things. However, he saw the correlation between our thoughts and healing in our body. So my dad miraculously went from 3 months to living an extra 30 years. And my dad was very religious. He had gone to church every day, and believe me, we as a family heard about Jesus all the time. But my dad, even more than saying Jesus' name, said Dr. Bernie Siegel, because Dad really felt without his help and with his center that Dad wouldn't have survived. So my dad gave back to Bernie. My dad raised money for Bernie's cancer group, and 5 times he actually rode a bicycle across country, across the United States, and all the money gave to Bernie's group. So my dad was very close to Dr. Bernie. And so when this man said to me, I don't know why, but I'm thinking Bernie Siegel. Now, Mia, I had never met the man, but I just thought that was like my dad's most favorite person. And so I went to BernieSiegel.com, and there's a button there that says, write to Bernie. And I thought, okay. So I wrote to Bernie, and I told him who I was and this, some of my dad's stories. And I even found a newspaper article of my dad on a bicycle, and all the money is being raised to send to Bernie Siegel's Exceptional Cancer Patients Group. And so, Bernie remembered my dad, and he said, I'll do it. So I got to send him the book just I printed out all the pages of it because it was long before it was published, and I mailed it to him, and then it is the most beautiful foreword. And that too, when people go to wedon'tdie.com, you can read the whole foreword of the book in the first chapter. So you can read that by Bernie Siegel. And then the other magical thing, and if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind spending just a couple of minutes about why I believe in life after death, telling you some of those stories, unless you have questions.
Absolutely. No, I don't have any other questions right now. Go ahead.
Okay, but the other story I had about Bernie was, I mean, this whole thing is just magical. I kind of think like there's this force, not just me, like I'm the mouthpiece and I was the fingers that typed it all, but I have this invisible group of people that were helping me. I had a friend of mine that I knew the title was We Don't Die, but I didn't have a subtitle. So he and I were going to take some time and just brainstorm one that didn't sound too new age, but it got the message across. And so on a trip I was flying, I actually had this thought. I got it, a skeptic's discovery of life after death. Like, I just loved it. I fell in love with it. Like, that's my subtitle. So I sent a text message to my friend, and he called me immediately, and he was crying. And now this is a proper, sophisticated man. I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, he had lost his mom. His mom had died, and he never quite got over her loss. But he says, Sandra, you're never going to believe this. I wrote down the same 7 words last night. I thought I had your subtitle. He said, out of all the words out there, because we hadn't even begun to brainstorm, how did we both think of the same thing? So then what was also neat about my book cover is if you look at it, it's a kind of a golden cover, and then there's a picture of a bridge crossing into like a lighted area, so it's crossing the bridge. I have a beautiful lady who, Kathy Dunn is her name, was the cover designer, and I gave her a copy of the manuscript as well, and she says, let me just create the book cover. If you like it, great. If not, we'll do something else. So I gave her just whatever she wanted to create. Well, the same day she sends me the book cover, Dr. Bernie Siegel sends me the quote that he wanted to see on the cover of the book, and it says, We Don't Die will allow you to truly understand creation and the nature of life. Perfection awaits us all when we leave our bodies and cross the bridge. So he says bridge, she sends a picture of the bridge all the same day, and it gives me goosebumps because even though my name is on this, it's almost like, we know when you go to a really good restaurant or see a good movie and you want to tell everybody about it, it almost feels like it's not my book. I mean, it's something that, I've certainly experienced it, and the stories seem similar, but it's just like, it's easy to share because it's a book about helping people have a great life now, giving hope that we are so much more than just our bodies. Our bodies may die, but we do not. That the person you know yourself as, with your personality, with the you that loves to laugh, the you that loves to love, that you that loves to be creative and stuff like that, that you goes on. The part of you that dies, besides the body disappearing, but that little negative voice of negative self-talk, the moment you close your eyes here on earth and you open them in the hereafter, the little negative voice is gone. I'm thrilled about that one. And also, something else that just came up to me is so many people say, if we don't die, where do we go? And people ask me if I believe in heaven, and where is heaven? And, I like to paint this story because it seems believable, but around all of us right now is, for most of us, I don't know where everybody is listening, but around a lot of us right now, we have these things called radio waves. Now, they exist, but we cannot see them. We have something called the wireless internet. We can't see it, but it's all around us. I turn on my computer. It says, oh, it's picking up, the internet here. We have GPS signals that, for many of us, have, like, programs on our phones that we keep with us in our car, and somehow it can not only transmit pictures we take, but the GPS is somehow, it can locate us where we are in the world. we have this unbelievable world that's happening that is invisible to our eyes, but it really exists. And I don't think anybody can argue with me upon that. Um, so science has proven that everything we see, we hear, our bodies, everything we're looking at, everything is made up of energy. In fact, if you were to break down, us into bits and pieces and molecules and atoms, and if you were to put a miniature camera inside an atom that we have inside of us, Mia, the camera couldn't pick up anything. What we are all made up of is this invisible vibrating energy. And it seems hard to believe because we can see things and we can touch things, but really getting down into the molecular level, we are all energy. So what I say about heaven is when we die, our body may disappear, but if you want to call it our soul, our essence, that energy that is us still survives, but kind of in this invisible place. Much like if you have a log that's burning, certainly the log disappears, but is the energy gone? No, it's turned to heat, so that sort of thing. And so when, we can talk a few minutes. I'm looking at the time. Gosh, it goes by fast. But because there's so many people, and even, like, I want to give you my biggest aha moment, why, first thing that I started believing that life after death is real, and it's got to do with mediumship. It's got to do with quieting the mind and being able to actually connect with our deceased loved ones. And I'll tell the story in a second, but the psychics and the mediums that are out there, and even people that have felt a loved one with them or have dreamt about a loved one, it's so easy to just chalk up to our imagination. But when our minds are quiet and literally, putting aside that little voice and being in the present moment, it's a real miraculous place. People that are mediums that can kind of see through the veil and connect with our loved ones, they say their mind has to be quiet. We had mentioned earlier to quiet the mind to help with the grief release and helping free ourselves from pain and get some healing in. Well, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the superstar performers and artists, and like people like Paul McCartney and Tina Turner and Sting, and even Steve Jobs, who invented, so much with Apple computers and the iPhones, and Albert Einstein, a lot of famous inventors would say, when I quieted my mind, that's where an idea came to me. And I think that as humans, we are more than being humans, I believe, but it takes quieting the mind to be able to connect into, whatever this invisible world is that we're part of. And so another thing people can find on my website, on WeDon'tDie.com, is I have a free audio called Reconnections. And what it is you can play it, and I recommend you do it when you can get away from people for a little while and lay down or sit in a chair. It's a 20-minute guided imagery, which really relaxes you from head to toe, but it puts your mind in that quiet place that you can actually invite in your deceased loved one and have a conversation with them. Now, it's happening all in your mind, and you may think that it's all in your mind, but with my next story I'm going to share with you, I'm going to tell you why I believe that our deceased loved ones, it's not a memory, it's not all in your mind. I believe that they are in that invisible place, much like where our internet is and all that kind of thing. And so our loved ones are around us. I don't think they are 24/7. In fact, this may make everybody laugh, but somebody wrote a book called Do Dead People Watch Me in the Shower? And I love that title because it's like, oh yeah, do they? People are all around us. Well, no, I think that our life is for a reason. I think here on Earth, there's all the emotions we experience can help us to grow as human beings. I think, anytime we can use any of our senses, like listening to a beautiful song or seeing a beautiful sunrise or, tasting a great piece of chocolate or, raw cacao, being you the raw girl, but anytime we can experience something, that's all growth for our soul kind of a thing. So I forgot where I was going, but looking at the clock, let me tell my story, okay? Can I do that? Okay.
Oh, yes, please.
This is Sandra the Skeptic, so let me paint the picture. This is going back to 2002. I had absolutely incredible fear of dying. I just couldn't sleep at night. I'd look at the stars and I'd think, what's the purpose of my life? What's going to happen after I die? Does anything happen? Will Sandra go on? And it was like a 24/7 panic attack. So I got the opportunity to see a medium do a stage show. And she was very accurately telling people who their deceased loved ones were in the audience. But I mean, she was incredibly accurate, not just, oh, your grandmother's with you, and she used to sing to you, and she loves you. No. Very, very, very specific. So it left me wanting to know more about this medium. And this woman, her name is Doreen Virtue, she offered a weekend course in mediumship. And in 3 days, you will be someone who can accurately see the deceased people around others. So that was actually the course. And I'm thinking, there's no way that's possible. There's just no way. Well, here's the thing. Sandra the Skeptic thought, only a lunatic would go to something like that because that's just not real. Sandra, who was afraid of dying, said, you know what? I don't have to tell anybody, but I'm going to go and I'm going to see if this is for real or not. So I paid money that I did not have in the bank account, thankfully for the MasterCard, and I flew to Laguna Beach, California for 3 days and spent 3 days playing medium. Now, I was petrified when I got there because I thought I'm going to be in a group of lunatics that actually believe this stuff. What am I doing there? My little voice just wouldn't shut up about wrong move, blew too much money. Well, when we got there was only about 20 people in the class. I didn't know anybody. And the instructor said, I want to tell you how medium readings are done. We're not going to do one right now, but we're going to just kind of play make-believe because she says, I want to just to have you guys know what it's going to be like. So she says, everybody grab a partner, and she says, pull your chairs so you're sitting knee to knee, and just kind of banquet chairs because this was in a hotel conference room. And she says, when we do medium readings, she said, you really have to, in your mind, just create this as a safe space. So just to kind of imagine a bubble of energy around you or something like that. And she says, I want you to imagine that there's this invisible beam of energy that's connecting you both heart to heart. And just have a lot of love present, and quiet your mind. See, there it is again, the quiet mind. But she says, I want you to invite, if there's a deceased loved one that wants to come through, for a message for your partner, you talk to them like you would talk to anybody else. You still have manners, introduce yourself. Of course, you're doing this all quiet in your own mind, but like, hi, I'm Sandra. Is there anybody that wants to come around, my friend, and, tell me their story? So, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm making all this up. And what Doreen said was, she's like, we're not really doing this. We are making it up. So just for practice, though, she says, I want you to imagine and make up that there's somebody standing behind your partner. And your job as the medium is simply to tell your partner if there's any names or a face or any details or anything that comes to mind. All you're supposed to do is tell the story of what you think or what you see. But again, this time, for the first time, we're just going to make this up, So, okay. Well, I'm very creative as a chef. You are too, I'm sure, Mia. And I thought, well, I can make somebody up. So there's usually also a profound message, or there can be, that comes through from a loved one. And so I had my eyes closed, and I'm holding this woman's hands. And so I invented in my imagination that there was a man standing behind her. And so I'm talking now, and I said, well, I'm seeing a man, and it's your grandfather, and it's on your mom's side. And then in my imagination, I create a guy. I said, well, he's a fisherman. He lives in Denmark. I said he's got really wind-burned skin and big gap between his front teeth and sandy blonde hair. It's kind of long, blue eyes. His name is Jan, And I said, he died of lung cancer. And I said, he never told your mother that he loved her while he was on Earth. So he wants you to tell her that he loves her. And so I opened my eyes, Mia, like, okay, it's your turn. And there's just these streams of tears that are running down my partner's cheeks. And she very quietly says, my grandfather's name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark. He died of lung cancer. He fit the description. And he never told my mom that he loved her while he was alive. And what do you say to that? I mean, I was absolutely stunned because if medium readings were real, certainly Sandra Champlain wouldn't be somebody who could do this. And I was. And I wasn't the only one. Everybody in the room could do it to a certain degree. And so we spent 3 days doing that. And I wasn't right all of the time. I think less than 50% of the time I got details correct. But so many of the times I got details correct. But now that I can have the confidence to tell my story because I've done so many other things as well, I realize that much of what we think is our imagination really isn't. Hang on, I have to cough for just a second.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. I have had a cold this past week, so I have this little mute button. I thought, oh, I'm going to cough. But so much of what we think might be our imagination, it isn't. So if you are somebody that has lost a loved one, and it may be a while since you've seen them or not long at all, you know, so many of us are so quick to either say, oh, we don't believe in that sort of thing, or we want to see a medium who can connect us. But here's the thing. Those folks are there, your folks are there when you need them. It is literally trying to quiet your mind and picture them, whether it's sitting on the couch next to you or being with you in the kitchen table, sitting by the kitchen table and having that conversation. Are you going to be able to hear what they have to say? Maybe, maybe not, because very often our minds want to overrun and say, I'm making this up, this isn't possible. I mean, we're often our own worst enemy. But to trust that they really are there. And what's tough is, you know, one of the reasons I say a skeptic's discovery of life after death, it's like you know, it's so crazy because at one point in time, our earth was just rocks and trees and greenery and water and dirt. And out of all of that, you know, houses were built, homes, huts, whatever, tools were built. And then suddenly several thousand years later, because Earth is pretty old, now we have iPhones and lights and, you know, everything we're looking at. Like, it's pretty miraculous, this world that we're living in right now. And it's so easy to not think it is. Like, even if we were around 200 years ago and we told somebody that there's going to be this thing called the telephone, or there's going to be a radio, and there's going to be these things called automobiles that drive us around, and there's going to be a little box inside that voices will come out or music will come out, you know, people would think, oh my God, you're crazy, that's impossible. And it's so easy to be skeptical because, you know, that's just how our minds are. We weren't born at this time, but the population of the earth used to think the earth was flat and that the whole universe revolved around the earth. That was the belief. And it wasn't even, it was a belief, it was the truth. I mean, that's just the way it was. People got killed that believed that the earth was round and that, you know, the sun was the center of our, you know, solar system where all these planets were. And so it took like 300 years before the whole conversation happened that, you know, the earth was round. So it's so easy for us just to believe what we can see and taste and touch and smell and hear. But, you know, I want to kind of shake people up a little bit about all the different things I've come across, because if, the earth was flat and now it's not, I say, so many people think, oh, yeah, when we die, it's just over. It's like, no, there really is enough proof that we do go on. And again, I can't get to it all because now I'm looking at the clock and our time's almost over. But on I'd love everybody to buy my book. Yes, I would, but you don't have to. And on my website, wedon'tdie.com, I talk about some of the other things, the journey that I have been on in so many different weird and wonderful ways through science and medicine and some of the psychic stuff that really lead me to believe that we don't die, and I think they will with you too. And ultimately, if you can have the best possible life while you're here, that's what I want to be your partner for, is to make sure that you have a great life. And so, we just play full out and we all get our money's worth out of living here on planet Earth.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for coming on the show and talking with us. And I would like to tell the people who are listening, either like while we're live now or listening to the archived material, is that to live your best life, best possible life while you're here. What is that going to take for you? I want people to be thinking about that. Maybe you already know. Maybe it's something that you're just starting to find out about, all the different possibilities and options that there are while we're alive. What can you do? What would you like to do? And it's just such a pleasure to have the radio show and have this as a what do you call it? Have it available for people to be able to maybe get some ideas or be inspired. And I'm definitely inspired by your book and by hearing you speak. And I've talked to you on the phone before, I think a few years ago, and then I am really interested in meeting you in person. So I hope that we can get together within the next year at some point. And I just thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Can I get in one more quick story? Because I'm like, why didn't I tell her this? This will take 30 seconds. There's a man that read my book that was an atheist, and he had to read it because he's like, how can somebody make a bold claim like we don't die? He read it. He came to find me because he said it changed his life. It opened him up to something else is possible. He's an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. He flew from Miami up to Massachusetts, where I live, spent 2 days with me and filmed a documentary about me. Because he said, if I could get that out of reading a book, what could people get out of watching it's 50-minute movie? And so that's on my website too, on wedon'tdie.com. That one there is a charge. It's $5.99, I think. But he filmed it, so I thought, he created that. But it is like, holy cow, and here is a professional man that didn't believe. And I don't push anything on anybody, but I really do want everybody to have a great life. And I just challenge everybody to maybe do one little thing that they fear, or at least think about it, because on the other side of that fear could be something really pleasurable and wonderful.
Yeah. Now, what is the name of that movie? Or and which website do we go to watch that?
It's my website, wedon'tdie.com. And the website, the movie is actually called We Don't Die, documenting a skeptic's discovery of life after death. So there's a trailer at the beginning of it. You can watch just a couple minutes and, make the decision yourself if you want to view it. But I wanted to tell you that is there as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I want to thank you again so much for being on, and we answered some questions for people and hopefully gave them some things to talk about. And so with that, I'll wrap it up and say thank you. Okay?
You're welcome. Good night, everybody.
Okay.